The day I found out I'd inherited $2.3 million from my great-aunt Harriet was the same day I learned. My husband had already decided what to do with it. Without telling me, without asking me, and without any of the awkward inconvenience of still being married to me. I remember sitting in the notary's office on Robson Street, downtown Vancouver. It was a Tuesday. I'd taken a half day from the hospital because the appointment had been rescheduled twice already, and I couldn't keep asking my supervisor to cover my afternoon patients. My coat was still damp from the rain. I'd grabbed a coffee from the Tim Hortons downstairs, and it was already going cold in my hand. The notary, a small, precise woman named Ms. Tran, was going through the paperwork methodically, the way you do when you've delivered both wonderful and terrible news so many times it stops looking like either one to you. She'd explained the terms of Aunt Harriet's estate, the probate timeline, the trust structure. Harriet had never married, never had children. She'd spent 40 years as an economist with the federal government and had been, apparently, extraordinarily careful with money. I was her only living relative on my mother's side who hadn't already passed or drifted so far away they'd stopped sending Christmas cards. I was still processing the number, $2.3 million, plus the condo in Victoria, when Miss Trissom paused. She looked up from her screen. She had this way of going very still before she said something important. "Before I complete this transfer into your name," she said, "I need to confirm your current marital status for the beneficiary documentation." "Married," I said automatically. 11 years of saying it without thinking. She typed something. She frowned. Not dramatically, just a small compression around her eyes. She typed again. "Miss Harlow," she said, and her voice was very careful. "According to the provincial registry, your marriage to Mr. Joel Harlow was dissolved 14 weeks ago." I didn't say anything. I counted to 5. I picked up my coffee. I took a sip of it even though it was cold. "Can you show me that?" I said. She turned the screen toward me. There it was. A dissolution certificate. My name. Joel's name. A date in early September, which would have been, I did the math without meaning to, the same week he'd taken our daughter, Maisie, camping in Whistler. The week I'd spent 3 nights on call and hadn't slept properly for 4 days. My signature was on the document. I stared at it for a long time. Miss Tran let me. "That's not my signature," I said finally. She nodded, once, very slowly, as if she'd been waiting for exactly those words. I don't remember driving home. I remember parking in the wrong spot in our building's underground and not caring. I remember standing in the elevator and watching the numbers change and thinking, very clearly, "Don't call him. Don't say a word. Figure out what you know first." That voice in my head, that flat clinical voice, it's the same one I use when a family comes into my clinic, and I can see before they've even sat down that the news is bad. You slow your breathing. You don't react to your own feelings in real time. You handle it. I used to think that was just how I was. Joel used to call it the doctor thing. He said it like it was a flaw. His name is Joel. I met him in second year at UBC. He was finishing a commerce degree and coaching junior hockey on weekends, and he had this easy, loud laugh that filled up rooms. I was quiet. I studied constantly. I thought he was the most alive person I'd ever met. I think, looking back, that I confused his noise for warmth. We got married the summer I started residency. It was small. 50 people. His parents' backyard in Kelowna, a tent because it rained. His mother, Lorraine, cried through the whole ceremony. I thought it was because she was happy. Joel went into commercial real estate. He was good at it, charming in the way that works well in that industry, always with the right bottle of wine at the right dinner. For the first few years it was fine. More than fine. We bought our place in Kitsilano. We had Maisie. I made attending physician. He kept telling people I was saving lives, which I wasn't exactly. I'm a rheumatologist, but I'd stopped correcting him because correcting Joel was its own kind of exhaustion. The problems weren't dramatic. That's the thing nobody tells you about a marriage going wrong slowly. There's no single moment you can point to. It's more like a room where the light has been gradually dimming for so long that one day you reach for the switch and realize you can barely see the furniture. He stopped asking about my days. I stopped expecting him to. He started staying later at the office or at client dinners, and I stopped tracking his schedule because I had my own. Macy was 9, then 10, then 11. She started preferring to stay at her friend Becca's on weekends. I didn't blame her. The house had gotten quiet in an uncomfortable way. About 8 months ago, I came home from a hospital fundraiser at the Fairmont and I saw a text on Joel's phone. He'd left it face up on the kitchen island, which was either careless or a strange kind of arrogance. The name on the notification was Fiona. The message was 3 words. I didn't read the rest. I put his phone exactly where I'd found it. I went upstairs. I lay in bed with the lights off, and I thought about what I was going to do for a very long time. What I did not do was confront him that night. I called my lawyer the next morning. Her name is Ruth Gallagher, and she has been practicing family law in Vancouver for 26 years. She is the kind of woman who, when you sit across from her and say, "I think my husband is having an affair," does not offer you sympathy first. She says, "Tell me what you know, in what order." I told her. She asked questions, then she said, "Don't change anything yet. Go home, behave normally, gather information, and don't tell him what you found or what you're thinking." Not yet. I am good at behaving normally. Joel had, ironically, been the one to teach me that. Years of standing next to him at his industry events, my face arranged pleasantly, saying the right things to people whose names I immediately forgot. I'd gotten very good at it. What I hadn't expected was that Joel would get there first. 14 weeks ago, while I was pulling back-to-back on-call shifts, while Maisie was up in Whistler learning to build a fire, probably, while her father sat nearby on his phone. I don't know exactly how he did it. Ruth explained it to me that same evening. I called her from the car, still in the underground parking of our building, because I couldn't go upstairs yet. Someone had impersonated me. A notary, not Ms. Tran, had processed the paperwork, someone apparently willing to look the other way, or someone who'd been shown a very convincing fake ID, or both. The dissolution had gone through. In British Columbia, with an uncontested mutual agreement and signed documentation, it can move quickly. It had moved quickly. He dissolved the marriage 14 weeks ago, Ruth said, and you've been living together since then. Yes, I said, and he hasn't mentioned it. No. There was a pause. Miss Harlow, Ruth said, I need you to listen to what I'm about to say, and I need you to take it seriously. Do not say a single word to him about this. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not until I tell you to. Do you understand? I said yes. I meant it this time. Going back into that apartment was one of the stranger experiences of my life. Joel was home. He was usually home by 7 on weekdays, at least, which I'd thought was consideration for Maisie, but which I now suspected was cover. He was reheating something on the stove. He looked up when I came in and said, "There's leftover pasta if you want it." Thanks, I said. I already ate. I hadn't eaten. I wasn't hungry. I sat at the kitchen island while Maisie showed me a drawing she'd done at school. A horse. She was going through a horse phase, and I listened and asked the right questions and tucked her in at 8:30. And then I came back downstairs and watched television next to a man who had, legally, become a stranger to me, and I said nothing. I am proud of myself for that night. I am less proud of the weeks that followed. Because holding that kind of information inside you while living a normal life is harder than anything I've ever done clinically. Every dinner. Every morning where he made coffee and asked what time I'd be home. Every time Lorraine called and left a message I had to pretend to care about. The weight of knowing and not saying is its own particular type of damage. Ruth was working. She and her team found the notary. It took 12 days. They documented the forged ID. They found the paper trail that led, eventually, to Fiona Marsh. I knew the name by then, of course. Fiona Marsh, 31 years old, worked in Joel's old office managing client accounts. I found her LinkedIn profile on a slow Sunday and then closed it because I didn't want to know anything more about her than I had to. It didn't matter to me who she was. What mattered was what had been done and what could be proven. What could be proven was considerable. Ruth's team found, buried in Joel's professional accounts, a pattern of transfer activity that had begun approximately 10 months earlier. About a month after I assumed whatever had started with Fiona actually started. Money had been moving from a business holding account that Joel and I had established together years ago to fund a rental property we co-owned in Langley. The amounts were not enormous individually, $2,000 here, $3,000 there. But over 10 months they amounted to just under $60,000. The money had gone to an account Ruth's team traced back to Fiona's name. When I heard that number, I felt sick in a specific way that had nothing to do with betrayal, and everything to do with the fact that I had signed the paperwork to establish that account, and my name was on it, and I had been a signatory, technically, throughout. Ruth explained to me, very calmly, that this constituted fraud. Not marital dispute. Fraud. She also explained something I hadn't fully considered. Because the divorce had been processed with a forged signature, it wasn't valid. We were still legally married, which meant the property division hadn't occurred, the terms he'd apparently been counting on hadn't kicked in, and Aunt Harriet's inheritance The $2.3 million, the Victoria condo, was mine alone, acquired after the filing of a fraudulent document that didn't hold legal weight. He tried to get ahead of it, Ruth said, and he miscalculated. I asked her what we were going to do now. She told me. There is a particular kind of calm that comes when you stop just surviving something and start making decisions about it. I've felt it in clinical moments. When a case that's been unclear suddenly becomes clear. When the blood work comes back and you know exactly what you're looking at and you know exactly what the path forward is. It's not happiness. It's not even relief. It's just focus. I had focus now. The next 2 weeks, I was told to continue as normal. I did. Joel mentioned once, during that period, that he was thinking about simplifying our finances, which had to be the most extraordinary understatement I had ever heard from him. I said that sounded fine and asked if he wanted me to pick up Maisie from school on Thursday because he'd had that client dinner. He said that would be great. He smiled at me. I smiled back. Ruth moved when everything was in place. On a Wednesday morning, Joel was served at his office. The documents included the filing to void the fraudulent dissolution, the detailed accounting of the transferred funds, and a formal separation agreement that had been prepared very carefully over the previous 3 weeks. Also included was a letter from the RCMP Financial Crimes Unit because Ruth had, with my agreement, contacted them about the forged notary documentation. I know about that Wednesday because his assistant, someone I'd met at Christmas parties for years, a kind older man named Derek, called me at 11 in the morning. He didn't say much. He just said, "Dr. Harlow, I think you should know that Joel is having a very difficult morning." He paused. "I've worked with him for 9 years. I thought you should know." I thanked him. I meant it. I didn't hear from Joel directly until that evening. I'd arranged for Maisie to stay with my colleague, Priya. Her daughter and Maisie are in the same grade, they get along well, and I was home alone when he came in. He looked like he'd driven through something. His face was gray. "You knew," he said. I didn't answer. "For how long?" "A while," I said. I sat down on the couch. "Ruth told me not to say anything to you, and I didn't. I want you to know that I tried to do this the right way." He started to say something about Fiona, that it wasn't what it looked like, or some version of that, the thing people say when it is exactly what it looks like. I held up my hand. "Joel," I said, "I don't need you to explain Fiona. I need you to understand what happens next, which Ruth will walk you through. What I want to say to you, personally, is this. I have spent 11 years being the quiet one in this marriage. The one who didn't make noise, who adjusted, who was easy to overlook. I want you to know that being easy to overlook and being easy to take advantage of are not the same thing, and you confused them." He sat down. He put his face in his hands. "The money," I said, "from the Langley account. $60,000. That's the part that's going to be the problem for you, Joel. Not me. Not Fiona. The RCMP." He looked up. I stood up. "I'm going to pick up Maisie now," I said. "You should find somewhere to stay tonight." Lorraine called me 4 times over the next 2 weeks. I let them go to voicemail. The messages went through a predictable progression. Concerned, then confused, then somewhat injured, then a long one at the end that I listened to once and then deleted. She'd known nothing about the divorce scheme. I'm fairly certain of that. She's many things, but she isn't calculated in that way. I think she genuinely believed Joel was just going through a rough patch. I think she'd probably been telling herself that for a long time. Maisie didn't understand everything, and I didn't want her to. She's 12 now, perceptive in the way that 12-year-olds are, asking questions at unexpected moments. I told her that Dad and I were going to be living separately, that it wasn't her fault, that we both loved her more than anything. She cried for about 20 minutes and then asked if she could get a hamster. I said yes. We named it Biscuit. The legal process took months. In the end, the fraudulent dissolution was formally voided. The separation agreement Ruth had prepared was thorough. The Kitsilano apartment went to Joel, because I didn't want to stay there, and I didn't want to make Maisie move schools, so the arrangement was that she stayed primarily with me at a rental nearby and kept her room at his place on weekends. The Langley property was sold and the proceeds split, minus the $60,000, which came off Joel's side in a separate financial settlement that was part of resolving the fraud matter before it went further. Fiona Marsh left Joel's company shortly after the documents were served. I don't know where she went, and I didn't ask. Aunt Harriet's $2.3 million, mine, clean, documented, untouched, I put into a trust. Some of it went toward a down payment on a house, in East Van with a yard big enough for Maisie to run around in, and, theoretically, for a hamster to have an outdoor habitat. though Biscuit seems perfectly happy with his tank. I talked to a financial planner, a woman named Ingrid who came recommended by a colleague, and we put together a plan. Maisie's education fund is fully loaded. My retirement looks, for the first time, like something I don't have to worry about. I went back to Ms. Tran's office on Robson Street about a month ago. She processed the beneficiary documentation into my name, without complication, on a clear November afternoon. She didn't say anything about the previous visit beyond a brief acknowledgement. She was professional and efficient, and I appreciated it. When I left, I stood outside on the sidewalk for a minute. It was cold. Vancouver cold. Not the brutal kind, but the kind that gets in. People were walking past with their heads down. I thought about that moment in her office, the moment I'd counted to 5 and said nothing. I don't think I fully understood at the time that the 5 seconds were the whole turning point, that the thing I didn't say was more powerful than anything I could have said, that the decision to be quiet, to be still, to take my cold coffee and not react, had given Ruth the time she needed, had preserved everything that needed to be preserved. Joel had expected, I think, a certain kind of response from me, the quiet one. The one who adjusts. The one who, confronted with a dissolution certificate bearing her forged signature, would perhaps be too humiliated to fight, too uncertain, too worried about what people would say. He'd had 11 years to watch me. He still didn't know what he was looking at. I buttoned my coat and walked back to my car. I had an afternoon clinic starting at 2. A patient with newly diagnosed lupus, a follow-up for a man with reactive arthritis, a consult referral I'd been meaning to review. A full afternoon, the kind of day I know how to handle. I drove back to work.